Hello, welcome back to DesignSpec. Today we're going to be talking about purchasing. I'll show you how to use the purchasing tabs, how to set up a purchase order, and how you can make adjustments to the PO defaults. Let's go into a project. If you go to the Specs tab, you'll see a list here of all the specs you have in this project. And then if you go into the Purchasing tab, you'll see a list of those same specs populates here. There's a few different ways you can create a PO. You can manually select the items you want, and they show up here on the right. You can add them to an existing order, or you can make a new order. You can delete an item one by one, or you can clear them all. You can also use the filter list here. You can filter by what has already been ordered. So you can see a list of all the specs that have been added to a PO. You can also select by vendor. So you can choose a vendor and have all the specs from that particular vendor show up here, and then you can add those to a PO that way. You can also go to the Vendors tab over here on the left, and all the vendors that have items specified in this project will show up here. So let's go ahead and make a new one for Allied Maker. There's 2 items from this vendor in the project, and now the information for those 2 items shows up here. So you can add a side mark. You can adjust the description. You can change the quantity and the unit and the price. And just note that any changes you make to the quantity and price here will not reflect back in the main spec window. You can add a note. The designer approvals will show up here, and the attributes for this particular spec show up here. There is a way you can adjust which attributes will print with the PO, so I'll go over that for you briefly. So let's save this. Now you'll see a new tab will pop up here called Details. And if you go to that tab, there's a lot of information here to input. You can jump around by using the hyperlinks on the left. So the PO number will automatically populate, but you can adjust that. You can assign a status and a submission date. We have the project information. We have a default tax amount set up here, so I'll show you where you can add that. We can request a deposit here, and perhaps there's an additional cost like a tariff. You can choose whether that's taxable. The vendor will automatically populate for you, and the rep will as well if you've assigned a rep to that vendor. You can use the autofill for the shipping to ship to a place or maybe to a contact from the contact list. You can also use the autofill for a build to and select someone from your contact list. You can manually input the submitter information here and the project contact, but there is a place you can include this by default so it shows up as the same person every time you make a project. So I'll show you how to do that. You can also input the terms and instructions by default. You can put in some shipping and delivery information. Note that the estimated shipping cost and the estimated shipping date is what will show up on the PO. And later you can input the actual dates when you know those. So let's save that. Now if we go to the Orders tab here on the left, you'll see that that order has now been created. So let's download the PDF and we'll see what the report looks like. So here you have the project information here at the top, the vendor, the shipping, and then the information on the item being ordered. So here's our side mark and the notes we added, quantity and cost, and then we have attributes, designer approvals, and also the linked specs. So to make some adjustments on what information shows up here, go to the home icon and you'll be brought to this set of pink configuration tabs. You can go to the purchasing setup, and this is where you can make adjustments to the global purchasing settings. This means that changes you make here will adjust the default settings for all purchasing across all projects in your account. So you can adjust defaults like the tax amounts, You can choose to include the specification instructions or not by using the text box, and the same for linked specs. So if you don't want these linked specs here to show up, deselect them here and they will not show up on the purchase order. You can also input terms and instructions here and your submitter contact, so you don't need to do it every time you make a new PO. And the same for your project contact. There's also a tab here on the left called Spec Attributes. So if you'd like this list here of attributes to change, you can choose here in this list which of those attributes will show up on the PO. So if you deselect all of these, then none of these attributes will show up here. Just note that if you've already made a purchase order for something, and then you go into these settings and you make adjustments, and you want these adjustments to show up, you'll have to delete this order and remake a new one so those changes are picked up. There's also a way that you can make some project-specific changes to these settings. So we're still in the Park Place Hotel right now, and we're in the gray project-specific tabs. So in the Purchasing tab on the left, you'll see Project Settings. So this will now make any changes here will override these global settings that we've indicated here. So you can override the tax amount. If you remember, we had the 8% here. You can also override the specification instructions, the link specs, etc. So if you turn this on, it's going to do the opposite of what the global purchasing settings has. So just some handy tools that you can use to make project-specific changes to these global settings. Hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time for the video on the budget reporting. Thank you very much.